Welcome to 1.4 Democracy in America Part 2. If you were not here and did not watch Part 1, this is your opportunity to push pause, go watch Part 1, because a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about in Part 2, is a reference to Part 1. So, Democracy in America Part 2, the first thing that we're going to be talking about is challenges to democracy. So, in the last section, we talked a lot about these theories of American democracy and what makes a democracy strong. So, Robert Dahl's ideas about what makes a democracy strong, and then maybe what's happening in America right now. And whether you're an optimist like a pluralist, or you're a hyper-pluralist, or you believe in the elitist theory, all of the things that we're going to go over right now are basically challenges that we face as a democracy and things that we're going to have to get over to be a full, strong, and functional democracy into the future. So the first issue that we have in the United States is that there's this huge complexity of issues. All of the issues coming at the people at all the time. Every time we start our news or turn on Twitter or look at Instagram, there's this new issue that we have to learn all about. And oftentimes that makes people feel upset. And because people feel upset, they turn off from politics. They don't look at issues. They don't really want to talk about these things because of the complexity, because they have to feel like they need to be experts on everything. And that increased complexity means that most people, or a lot of people, aren't going to have full information when they're actually voting for them. Second, limited participation in government. Now, this is a really important idea that we have right now, is that really there's a low voter turnout when we compare our democracy to other westernized democracies. So here's a graph that looks at people over the age of 65 and people from 18 to 24. Now you can see in both areas that obviously the people over 65 are participating a great deal more than people 18 to 24 years of age. And you can see this sawtooth pattern, and what accounts for that sawtooth pattern is the upswing is the presidential election, and the downswing is those midterm elections. So, for example, you're going to have a lot of people participating in the presidential election of 2016. You're going to see a little bit of a decline in 2018. You're going to see an increase in 2020. It's going to go down in 2022. It's because most people really, really want to participate in the presidential election. And again, the complexity of issues. There's more candidates. It's confusing. The president isn't even on the ballot in 2000 or in those midterm elections. So why am I going to participate? It's so hard to figure everything out. But what you're also going to see in this pattern is that participation in America is very low, and it's very low amongst younger people. And for democratic theorists, that's very scary. They're worried that because the youth of the United States don't participate at higher rates and have actually declined in participation over the last 50 or so years, that spells real trouble for our democracy. Second, the escalating campaign costs are also troublesome for democracy. So this is another graph that I'm going to show right here, and it's going to show presidential campaign spending from 1960 to 2016. This is also what you'll see here is this does account for inflation. So for all those people who are like, well, does it account for inflation? Yes, it does account for inflation. Yes, it does account for inflation. So don't worry. All right, so this particular graph is showing you an increase in campaign spending. Now, we're going to talk a lot about campaign spending and what caused the so much money going into campaigns. But as you can see, over time, when it comes to presidential elections, you've really seen an increase in the amount of money it takes to become president. What's even more stark is when you look at the spending when it comes to the House of Representatives or to get a Senate seat. To become a House of Representatives member, it's going to cost over $1 million to run for office. And the Senate, it's probably about 10 times that amount of money. And those escalating campaign costs mean that people are going to have to listen to the people who give them money, maybe more than the people who are actually voting for them. And that's a real concern going forward in our democracy. Diverse political interests is the last thing that we are really worried about as political scientists. Now, is it bad to have diversity? Absolutely not. We love diversity. I don't want you to come out of this video saying, oh my God, Mr. Levoni hates diversity. He thinks that diversity is a bad thing. No. It's that these diverse political interests are so wide apart. And because they're so wide apart, and because we don't trust each other, it's a real worry for democracy. In the United States, what we see oftentimes is because we have so many different ideas and because we don't trust each other, the two-party system has really broken down. Now, in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s, you could see Republicans and Democrats working together on bipartisan legislation. And really, to get anything done, you have to have the Republicans and Democrats somewhat working together to pass legislation. But because we've had this split and this diverse political opinions that really are tribal in their nature, we've had policy gridlock, and really nothing gets done. Everything grinds to a halt. That's really, again, bad for our future of our democracy. So now we've gotten negative, now we're all sad, and now we're all upset. So is there anything that we can look to for the future to make sure that maybe our democracy does have a chance? Well, that's the last part of this section of the chapter, where we're talking about American political culture and democracy. Political scientists and political scientists and theorists believe that for us to have a true democracy, us to have a united way together, there has to be a political culture. Now, what does that mean? It means that we have common ideas about how this world runs and how this government should act. And if we have those common ideas, perhaps in the future, we can come together and agree on issues. So what are some of those common touch points? Well, one of the first touch points in the United States is the idea of liberty, right? In one of our most famous stories from the American Revolution is Patrick Henry saying that he would rather live free or die. It's right here. It's right, literally right in front of me. I can see it. I can read it. I don't know why I couldn't remember it. So he wants to live free or die, right? The idea of liberty is so entrenched in our bones in the United States that we truly believe in that freedom. And freedom, more than anything else, is so important. We can all hold on to those ideals. Second, individualism. Now, the United States, unlike a whole lot of westernized democracies, was founded without an aristocracy, was founded without a ruling class, and because of that, there's this notion of individualism. Further, when immigrants came to the United States, they found an enormous amount of land from which they could settle. Now, we're not going to not problematize the fact that you had an enormous amount of land that was occupied by people, and it was, these founding fathers who did founding frontiers that knocked other people off the land. But these ideas of individualism and being on the frontier and working on your own is really rooted in some of the stories and foundational ideas of our country. Laissez-faire is a French word, which is odd because we speak English in the United States, but laissez-faire means hands-off. And hands-off is regarding government. Right? So the government should have its hands off. We don't want this oppressive force of the government down upon us. Now, liberals and conservatives are going to disagree about how much government intervention we want to have in our society, but they're going to say that the government can be oppressive, and if the government is oppressive, it is up to us to make sure that we are more free. That liberty thing again, right? Populism. Now, both political parties say that they are the most populist. The liberals and Democrats believe that they are the most populist party because they're fighting for the common man who wants their health care and wants energy security and those types of things for the little guy. And they're fighting against the corporate interests that are coming down upon them. Whereas Republicans often argue that we're arguing for the real America, the real Americans, and we're going to make America for the real Americans. Why do they always do that? Why do Republicans and Democrats always say, oh, we're for the little guy? Well, it's because this idea of populism, fighting for the popular person, the common man, is an ethos and a myth in the United States that truly speaks to an American voter. And so the different political parties are going to use that to try to convince their constituents and independents to vote for their particular party. Egalitarianism. Now, egalitarianism means that everybody gets a fair shot and everybody gets a fair say in our society. And your book does a really good job of problematizing whether or not that actually happens. So if you look at turnout in elections, so looking at 2012, we can see on this graph, that's the red bar there, as you go up in income, you increase the amount of participation in the election. So for example, under $2,000 a year, they participated at about 47%. And if you made over $150,000 a year, you participated at about 80%. Now, if you look at what their opinions on certain political issues are, you're going to see a difference as well. So, for example, people who make under $20,000 a year, they believe that government, there's not a lot of them, there's like 68% of them that believe that government should reduce income differences. So government should get involved in the economy. And then when you're looking at over $150,000 a year, you're going to see that they want more people or more individual laissez-faire stuff and less government intervention in the economy. Now, the question I have for you, and this goes to egalitarianism, is if the people who are participating in government are those people at the top end, who do you think the politicians are probably listening to? Now, I might sound like an elitist here, but when we're talking about egalitarianism, we need to talk about whether or not this system is fair. Is everybody getting a fair shake? And if there's people who aren't participating and their views are much different than the people who are participating, then some voices in our democracy aren't being heard.